What is up, wrestling fans? Welcome to another Pay-Per-Viewpoint edition of the Smark Out Moment Smack Talk podcast. Full Gear just ended about 30 seconds ago, and I'm going to break that down, talk about what happened, who won all the matches, what I thought about all the matches, and everything else like that. I am your host, as always, Toni Mango, flying solo for this edition. Rob is covering the media scrum, and Callum is in the UK. It's ending at 11:57, so, time zones, different story. I see we got the live chat, some people getting in there. I see Marco and Marquise are there. What's up, guys? Everybody else, in the meantime, if you are hanging out, make sure that you chat it up in the live chat there, and I'll be reading those throughout the night. What we got right here, we got Cool Ending. Who else saw that coming from light years away? Still cool to see. I have a lot of good things to say about this pay-per-view, and a couple negative ones as well. I mean, this wasn't perfect by any means, but, we've had plenty of pay-per-views in the past where I've pretty much moaned and bitched and complained and whatnot, and this isn't going to be really one of those. I think that this was overall a lot of thumbs up going on here. We got some others in the chat. Dane, Christopher, Grimm. What's going on? First AEW event I actually watched. I really liked it. That's cool. Happy for JF. That Hayter Storm match was a perfect amount of way too much. Yeah, it's going to be one of the things that we're going to talk about that isn't going to be wholly positive, but I do have a lot of positives to get to as well. So keep in mind, everybody, if you are listening to this after the fact and you're not in the live chat, I still want to know what you have to say about this. So by all means, leave a thought in the comments below and tell me what you liked, what you didn't like, and everything else along that spectrum. See, Frankie's in the chat now, too. Great show. AEW needed a show like this. Hopefully it gets them back on track. There was a certain feeling to me of this being like, not really a reset, but in some ways kind of like, okay, let's move past All Out and move into the next phase of everything. We got some new champions crowned. We got, with the Elite, at the very least, it became very clear that was like, all right, they're in better graces than CM Punk. The crowd, of course, was not very so CM Punk. We'll talk about that too. So I got a good sense that it's not a full correction. It's not going to undo the things that happened with the past year, but it's a step in the right direction at the very least. Let's see what we got with here. We got Marquis says, here comes what we are really looking forward to, the media scrum. Yeah, I got a feel it's not going to be all that eventful. I highly doubt that we're going to get somebody who's going to ask, QT Marshall something, and he's going to go off or whatever it might be. But, maybe. I told Rob to shoot me a message if anything crazy happens. And, if it does, then we'll address it. If not, I'm not listening to it while I'm doing the podcast. So it would be a little bit too difficult for me to read my notes and read the live chat and talk and check to see about the stream information and check OBS and then also listen to that. But if anybody does notice anything, drop something in the chat below if you're listening to both at the same time. Let's start getting into this with the 0 hour pre-show. 3 matches on there that we didn't talk about prior to when we did the Pay-Per-Viewpoint predictions or when we did the hot tags, because they hadn't been announced yet at that point. But the first one being Best Friends, the trio of Orange Cassidy, Trent Beretta, and Chuck Taylor, teaming up with Rocky Romero and Danhausen. And despite the fact that they did a little weird thing here where they were like, all right, we're not going to say who the tag team partner is, but we're going to tell you that it's basically Danhausen. And then part of the way through the match, he's going to come out. I didn't really like that all that much. They were up against the Factory, and this match was one of my least favorite of the night for a few reasons. It was just a generic match. It's one of those things that really didn't need to be on this card whatsoever, and just sort of felt like it was taking up some time for me. But I've said before many times, I'm not a fan of the Danhausen character. He's probably a nice guy. He's probably a great guy, actually. I should say that, but it doesn't do anything for me. There's certain. Comedy is subjective, of course, so for some people, they wouldn't like my favorite comedies of all time. My top 5 being Robin Hood Men in Tights, Naked Gun, Not Another Teen Movie, Dumb and Dumber, and Clerks are my top 5 favorite comedies of all time. And even that's got a little bit of a range of comedies. But yeah, some people think that that's not funny, and some people think that something like Dude, Where's My Car is funny. And you can't tell anybody that they can't find something funny and whatever. So Danhausen works for certain people. It doesn't work for me. Orange Cassidy is more my speed. I think that he is great. Of course, I've mentioned that a million times, but the Danhausen thing doesn't work for me. So when the match revolves around the idea that Danhausen is coming back and this feud is about the factory that I haven't liked from essentially the get-go, then it's not going to really go well for me. You know what I mean? He's got a jar of teeth, a spike, and you're supposed to pop over the big return or whatever, and then him getting the win over Nakamura, and then them doing the big 5-person hug. Meh, not for me. So Danhausen and his crew win that match, and I pretty much just moved right on after that. And we've got the announcement that Konosuke Takeshita is now a part of AEW. He is on the roster. He had a little interview with Renee Young where he essentially said, I'm excited to be on the roster. Nothing really big happening there. Nobody started an angle with him or anything along those lines. But hey, he's talented. So you get another guy on the roster who could wrestle. What's bad about that, We had the Ricky Starks against Brian Cage World Championship Eliminator Tournament semifinals match. Ethan Page on commentary because, of course, he is in the finals and he's going to go up against the winner of this, which, as everybody pretty much expected from a million miles away, Ricky Starks was the winner of this. He is going to go up against Ethan Page on Dynamite to settle who fights the champion coming out of this. And by the end of this night, now I'm kind of thinking maybe, you know what? Maybe there is something to the Ricky Starks win. So Ethan Page made a lot of sense, but if they were just setting him up to be a little bit of a red herring, then you know what? I like the idea of Ricky Starks getting that win too. So kind of on board with whatever that might be. Then we got the Jun Akiyama against Eddie Kingston match, and Kingston was super emotional about doing this and, having a dream match of his to a certain extent. They had a good match. It's not maybe the type of match for everybody and all that. And we've seen similar matches before and some other matches that I've actually in the past been like, I don't see what was so great about it. Now, if people say that this is like a match of the year candidate, then I think that it's going into that same territory of people blowing it out of proportion. But I thought it was good. And I thought it was even better what happened afterwards. So Eddie Kingston wins and then he has his show of respect. He bows to Akiyama, who bows back, and then Kingston gets a microphone and he starts telling everybody about I hope that I did all these legends like Ricky Dozan and all. I hope I did them proud. But then he says, hey, it's like 7:53 or whatever. Order the fucking pay-per-view. We got John Moxley is going to beat the piss out of MJF, and the crowd boos. And he's like, you can boo all you want. He's still a piece of shit. And Jamie Hayter's going to wrestle. And he starts basically just promoting the card until he realizes that he's getting called away because they're running out of time. They have to set up the steel cage. So he's like, I got to go. All right, see you later. Bye. I thought that was kind of fun with that little bit of Kingston stuff. And, for a 0 hour, you got 3 matches that one of them matters and then the other 2 don't, but one's a cross-promotional thing and the other thing is like a gimmicky, silly thing. You're trying to kind of appeal to a wide range. I understand what they're going for, but I do sort of feel like the fact that these pay-per-views go until midnight and I have to start working prior to 7 o'clock, it wears me out. And you can tell that the crowd is in a similar situation and they don't have to do the live coverage for it. They're just sitting there watching it. So imagine how I am where I'm like, all right, I got to do multiple live coverages at the same time. And when we get done with this podcast and it'll be 1, 2 in the morning or whatever it is, then I'm going to have to write up another article about it. So yeah, these pay-per-view nights are really long. All the setup that I do ahead of time with like the graphics and all and writing up predictions and everything. I don't know actually how much time per pay-per-view I spend working on it. If I actually crunch the numbers, I wonder if it would be a full day, like a full 24 hours for each pay-per-view. Cause it might be based off of, prepping multiple podcasts and multiple articles. It could very well be 24 hours per pay-per-view, which is exhausting, but nevertheless, grim there. It's 5 a.m. here. Yeah, at least I do have it easy when it comes to that. Yeah. If it was the other way around, I don't think we'd be having post shows. Because even though I'm somebody who barely sleeps and, That's not healthy at all for me. It's not something that I think many people would be necessarily tuning in, and it'd probably be just way too exhausting. But glad to see that there are, over a dozen or so people in this chat, even if it is 5 a.m. Let's start with the main card here with the steel cage match. Jungle Boy Jack Perry up against Luchasaurus. This was a good match, as expected. I mean, look at the two that are involved. And that was kind of one of the running themes, the matches that ended up being good. Well, you saw that coming. Good wrestlers can wrestle good. Good things are good. It works. So Jungle Boy ended up getting bloodied up quite a bit in this match. To the point that my wife was even just like, oh my God, like, wow, he's really bleeding. But they had a great contest here. A lot of back and forth action. Luchasaurus looking strong. Jungle Boy fighting back. One of my favorite moments of this entire show was actually a little bit of commentary work. There was a section of this towards, I think it's probably like 3/4 of the way through the end of the match or so. I didn't timestamp anything, but they were talking about, the heart that Jungle Boy has. He just keeps going, and he's got so much heart that he is not going to lose this match. And I'm thinking that it was Excalibur that had said the follow-up line. Might have been wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was Excalibur. Had said, yeah, but the more that his heart beats, more blood's going to pump out, and that's going to get even worse for him because, he's bleeding profusely from his face, and the more that his heart pumps, the more it's going to pump that blood out. He's going to get woozier and everything like that. I thought that was a really good analysis that, you don't see that much in a lot of matches. It's typically a lot of the same tropes, a lot of the same terminology, and, what does he have to do to put away, blah, 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 and those things. And that was just a good little thing. I like that quite a bit. That was one of my favorite parts of the entire night. Got a good choke slam through the chair and, some different moments here and there. But this ultimately ended up with Jungle Boy jumping off the top of the cage and doing an elbow drop through the table and then making Luchasaurus tap out. So great start to the pay-per-view outside of, the 0 hour. But I thought it was pretty great. And one of my favorite matches of the night for sure. Not going on my match of the year candidate list. Actually, none of the matches on here are going in my match of the year, but I do think that this is a contender for the best match of the night. So kudos to Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus. And they continued this with the World Trios Championship match. Before we talk about that, let me read a little bit of the chat things here. I didn't even have to buy the pay-per-view. Smark Out Moment calls all the matches. Yeah, there you go. That's a plug. Reggie says, I almost went to the show, but just too late to get people. That sucks when that happens, doesn't it? I thought about going to Extreme Rules. I thought about trying to set up something for, forget exactly which pay-per-view it was before that. It might have been like a Royal Rumble or something. And it's just too hard to kind of figure out the ticket stuff these days, especially with the way that Ticketmaster is. And I mean, look at the Taylor Swift thing. The whole thing crashes, and the Jungle Boy must have watched an HBK cage match from the mid-90s. Yeah, maybe that's why I liked it. Maybe it's reminiscent of that. So that Trios Championship match starts off with the Elite getting a special entrance to Carry On My Wayward Son by Kansas. That was pretty cool. And pretty early on in this, we get a fuck CM Punk chant, followed by a Colt Cabana chant. So the AEW collective of fans, I mean, not everybody, obviously, because there's plenty of people that are on CM Punk's side, but a good portion of them, at least in Newark, very much pro Elite. And the way that, popularity kind of swings, the pendulum is kind of, what you done for me lately, sort of. So I am not at all surprised to see that people were very pro Elite and very anti CM Punk in this way, because the Elite are there and they're going to wrestle and they're going to stick around and everything. So that wasn't too shocking, but then again, hearing that was still a little bit shocking, just because it was very, you can't play around with the what's the message behind this one. No, it's a very transparent message. It's fuck CM Punk. And I know that Dace was having an issue with that, not being a fan of those chants. We had some good action here, of course, and again, look at who is in the match. You got Pac and the Lucha Brothers against the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega. It's going to be a fun back and forth. So they've got great things, the Hurricanranas and everybody doing all the flippy stuff that Braun Strowman would really hate. There's a, Black Arrow goes into the brutalizer and lots of near falls that kind of lead into the building of the tension and everything like that, including a situation where Pac is tossing the hammer to Phoenix, who had been against the idea of using that in the past, and he decides that he doesn't want to do it again, gets a V-trigger from Kenny Omega for doing that. And, a minute or so later, it comes back around. So Phoenix decides, you know what? I am going to use that hammer. Hits Kenny Omega in the head, and Death Triangle get the win. So they have retained the titles. Phoenix is upset with himself for doing that. And a lot of people were shocked by this. So a lot of, oh my God, I can't believe that they lost. And, for Bleacher Report, you got a little thing called Perfect Picks where you get to pick whatever. It's not necessarily all the matches, but sometimes there's some other little things in there. And I was like, I'm going to go with, at the end of the day, I kept saying there was a chance that Death Triangle could win. I'm going to go with Death Triangle here. So I netted myself quite a bit of points on that one. I'm very happy about that. And I think that it was the right call, actually, because if they would have gone with the Elite coming straight out of this, I think that could have backfired. And maybe those Foxy and Punk people, despite the fact that they're pro Elite, could have done the thing that happens with a lot of people. How many people were firmly behind the push Dolph Ziggler to the mountaintop, and then they turn into, I don't really like that Dolph Ziggler guy. He won the title. It happens a lot. Fans are very fickle. Ask Daniel Bryan. And the way that you're going to follow this up with is that this is actually just the first of a best of 7 series that it's going to carry. Potentially, best of 7 doesn't need to be 7 matches, but it seems like it most likely would be. It's going to carry out through the new year. They're going to do seemingly at least one a week going forward. And then, we got Winners coming up, and New Year's, what do they call it? New Year's Smash, I think is what it is. Holiday Bash is another thing. The Bash and Smash, I keep forgetting which one's which, but they got those coming up, and that looked like that was the finale of this, would have been the New Year one. So we are probably going to get a lot of this going forward, and I'm really hoping that they continue to do such a great job that it doesn't just completely make me feel like skipping it, because we've heard the song and dance from me a million times before. If you do a match and it's great and you follow it up with a great one, most likely I'm going to want to see the other third great one. But if you follow it up with something that doesn't match or surpass it, I'm probably going to tune out. And I kind of agree with Frankie here, saying I'm surprised that they didn't do a best of 5 instead. Best of 7 is kind of assuming that that's going to work out. It's a big jump at the very least. So they're going to bury that down to the point that I'm never probably going to want to see one of those matches again. But I honestly might end up skipping some of them just to save that from happening for me, because the burnout's real. And when I watch Dynamite, I typically watch it after it's already aired. I usually catch up right afterward. Thankfully, Dallas covers it for a Smark Out moment for me, so I don't have to do that live like I do with NXT, for instance. But when there's a match that I'm not interested in, I'll skip it if it doesn't seem like it's all that important. And the grand scheme of things, a best of 7 series normally goes 7 matches. So, I'll watch the second match, and if they do something that keeps it really interesting, I'll continue watching until they do something that doesn't. But if we're 2 matches deep into this and, the third or fourth match ends up being something that just feels like they're going through the motions, then I'll probably wait until we get to the finale. Or at least I'll wait until the special shows like Winter's Coming and such. Yeah, Frankie's suggestion of the best of 7 series between Cesaro and Sheamus. I think that might have been the last one of those between AEW or WWE. It's the last one I remember, at least. There might have been another one in the meantime. That's the last one I can recall. And, that ended up being not necessarily 7 great matches, but it ended up being a good series. And then, we got the bar out of that. And then we got the way that they used to say that. We are the bar. And everything. So that was great, too. But the bar, one of those underrated tag teams that just comes out of nowhere and ends up actually doing a great job. And yeah, maybe something amazing comes out of this, or maybe it's just an elongated way to stretch this out and give the Elite the titles down the line without having to completely bury it and do some sort of a storyline. Because really, look, realistically, the storyline here is, don't you like to see these guys wrestle? there isn't that much of an actual story. This isn't some kind of complicated tale with this complex web of intricate back and forth kind of arguments and stuff. It's just good wrestlers going up against each other, and that's what people want to see in the AEW audience a lot more than they do a lot of the other feuds. So I'm sure a good portion of the fan base is just going crazy over this, and they're the pants are getting tighter from that. Ted says they probably have 7 different matches set up. I doubt you get the same thing multiple times. That's what I'm hoping for, is that they gimmick the hell out of this. Like, maybe the next time around you might get around with doing a regular match, but at least somewhere along the line, maybe do a ladder match, maybe do a no DQ match, maybe do some kind of like gauntlet type thing, or I don't know, maybe if they can figure out a way to change up the formula. But at least you need a couple gimmicks in there. If not, it's just going to be 15-20 minutes each time of them doing a lot of the same maneuvers, because how many times are we really going to watch somebody do a triple super kick, or the series where it's like the V triggers leading up to somebody just completely no-selling it and then hitting like a sling blade or something. Really cool outfit, by the way, for Penta tonight. That Joker outfit, that's going to be on my list of some of the best ring gear. And also, speaking of some of the best ring gear, next match had Jade Cargill coming out as Chitara, essentially, from Thundercats, which, curious if in the chat, let me know. Are you a Thundercats fan? I was never a big fan. I had watched, some episodes back in the day, but Thundercats is one of those little blind spot things where it's kind of in that age range just above me. I'm pretty sure it came out like mid 80s. Let me double check to see when this is. 85 to 89. So that is not past my age bracket, but it's above my age bracket by just a hair. There's the crew of people that grew up on those 80s cartoons that are a little bit more of like the Voltron and Thundercats and He-Man and whatnot. I was not in that, because by the time that I got to the age where I'm actually like watching TV shows and all, we're talking early 90s, even more so, because I'm a very late 80s. 87 is, you're not really going to remember too much from 89. It is funny though, because Batman 89, I remember being in a casino and having that poster up and me being like, it's Batman. So it's like, clearly, even as a kid, that was like, I'm 3 years old at max. I remember being like, oh man, that's Batman. This is the fucking coolest. So, then again, I'm talking about how Terminator 2 has been my favorite movie since it first came out. So sometimes you watch RoboCop when you're a little too young for it. Sometimes you don't. Thundercats is a little bit of a blind spot for me. I'm going on a whole big tangent about this instead of the match, I know. But the Thundercats look, at least, very cool for Jade Cargill. And, she did the She-Hulk thing and all. So this is going to be, I guess, a running thing going forward of her. And if she keeps pulling off these kind of things, then you know what? That'll be an extra added bonus to her presentation, because it got me talking about another thing for a little bit here. It's something that's going to go on my list of some of the best ring gear and everything. And as far as the Thundercats reception in the chat goes, Marquise never watched it. Ted, not really. It was He-Man, but they were cats instead, right? Yeah, it kind of seemed like that was the case. So, yeah, and you look at the main guy. I'm blanking on the name of the main one. This is how much I don't know about Thundercats. I think it's like Thundra or something. Is that even completely unrelated? Who do we have? Who's the main characters here? Lion-O. So who's Thundra? Is that another guy? I don't know. Maybe that's another character in something. Dane says that it's the cure for insomnia. I bet if you watch one of those old episodes, it's probably just garbage. But, certain group of fans, I'm sure, really like it. Nyla Rose's entrance was the lowrider, essentially biting off the whole Eddie Guerrero thing. Not a fan. To be honest, I don't think that it suits her character whatsoever. I don't really understand what Nyla Rose's character is supposed to be, because she seems like she's kind of just a meme a lot, and playing into the meta side of the way that seemingly like the Young Bucks and some other people tend to like some of their wrestling. Never been a big fan of Nyla Rose's character. I didn't like this story to begin with, and I wasn't really feeling this going into it, but I gotta say it was a better match than I had expected. This was interesting to see Cargill not be the fully dominant person for the first time. She had to wrestle a little bit of a different style going forward. She's kind of fighting from underneath and all. Very much seemed like just positioning her to be a babyface, and this whole feud has been very Cargill as the babyface, but we don't really want to go in that direction heavy. So I don't know, maybe they want to change their minds going forward, maybe not, but she is able to retain the title. She gets Jaded for the win. And, you know, in the grand scheme of things, this was better. So I liked it. I gotta say that, you know, I'm always willing to admit when I'm wrong. You know, when I think I've been proven wrong at the very least. Was Vicky wearing a Rhea Ripley shirt? I don't know. I didn't notice that. Might have to go back and double check that. If it is, then that's interesting that they would have allowed that. That's kind of weird. Question, when you refer to the meta style of wrestling in AEW, what do you exactly mean by that? So by that, I typically mean when they do things that they're referencing the fact that they're pro wrestlers and that they are calling attention to, like, for instance, the Bullet Club doing the Too Sweet. That's basically them just being like, hey, NWO was cool. Why don't we be the NWO? They used to do this. Let's do that again. We have the black and white. We have that logo. We have a million people coming into our faction. They make no reservations of the idea that the Young Bucks just pattern themselves off of that mid-90s Shawn Michaels a lot with the way that, you know, they dress and then the super kicks and everything else like that. When they do things like they call their finisher the Meltzer Driver, that sort of wink and nod, you know, tongue-in-cheek, elbow, you know that this is fake, but that's what's supposed to be fun. It's that you understand that it's fake, kind of. That seems very Young Bucks and Kenny Omega-ish to me. And, you know, when you see, like, the differences between the way that the Cody Rhodes matches tended to be in the past, that felt very WCW to me. And that's why I always used to say, like, it seems like the Elite wants to have wrestling that's kind of a wink and a nod. Cody seems to want to have wrestling that's WCW, and Tony Khan seems to want to have wrestling that's WWE, or at least, you know, maybe WWF. Three conflicting booking styles. You got rid of one of them with Cody Rhodes, then now you're seeing a little bit of a 50-50 going on here with somebody like an MJF is booked a lot like a WWF guy, and then people like the Young Bucks and such, they end up going a little bit more on the meta side. So yeah. Cargill looks like a star. She needs a bit more improvement, but man, she's got that it factor. She keeps getting better. I'll say that, you know, over time, that's going to become less and less of an argument for her. And then it's going to be more and more of just, she's the top woman. Just definitively, she'll be at the top. That's for sure. Was it better than Paige Britt Baker's match? Well, we'll get into that and I'll tell you then. After the TBS title, we got the ROH World Championship 4-way match. And my first note was, what the hell is Sammy Guevara wearing? This has got to be some kind of an anime thing. I do not like anime. I cannot get into any anime that I have ever seen whatsoever. And that's completely lost on me, whatever the reference is. I am assuming, based off of the zero bit of anime knowledge that I know, that it's probably a Dragon Ball Z thing, because it seems like it almost always comes down to that. There's like 5 animes that I hear of constantly. It's Dragon Ball Z, My Hero Academia, Cowboy Bebop, Bleach, Naruto. I don't know. It seems like they're all just like somebody's possessed by a demon and they control sand or something. But that's my go-to. I don't know why I keep using that excuse. But yeah, I don't know what he was wearing, but it looked ridiculous. And it made me pop that there was a sign in the crowd that said, hold number 712 armbar. One of my favorite WCW moments of all time. So in typical fashion, this is a 4-way, and you've got 2 people working together and 2 people working together. What happens? They end up breaking down communication, and you get Castagnoli and Bryan Danielson deciding that they're going to actually wrestle each other after they take out Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara. And then a little bit later on, Jericho hits a lion salt on both Danielson and Guevara, and Guevara's working for himself. And turns out that he's going to just decide to not necessarily give the match to Chris Jericho. So yeah, Attack on Titan's another one that I hear of constantly. And I still don't know what what any of these. I couldn't pick these out of a lineup. I'm assuming that there's Titan and it gets attacked. The match was great. You know, again, Guevara, Jericho, Danielson, and Castagnoli. Yeah, it's going to be a great match. You got 4 people who work really well together. So you saw the breakup between different people here and there. They'll probably just come back to normal, and you'll see Castagnoli and Danielson have no ill will over the fact that they were wrestling each other because it's the spirit of competition. Guevara and Jericho, there might be some kind of a segment where it's just sort of like, hey, you know, well, what were you doing out there? And then they patch things up or something, but I don't think this is going to lead to Guevara leaving the Jericho Appreciation Society. The Jericho Appreciation Society. That's how words work. Anytime soon. I think that this is just because the match itself needs to work that way. Otherwise, you end up getting Jericho just pinning Guevara from the onset, and then you don't have the match. So a lot of near falls, a lot of great maneuvers here and there, as expected, and it all leads to Jericho retaining with a pinfall on Claudio. Following out of this, we're going to get Chris Jericho defending the ROH World Championship against Tomohiro Ishii on Dynamite. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to really like that match. And we're also going to get Orange Cassidy against Jake Hager, because they had a little backstage segment where Orange Cassidy was talking about how Ishii wants to have that match. And then he ended up just basically saying that he wanted to fight Jake Hager and put his All-Atlantic Championship on the line. And then also said, nice hat. So, you know, call back to all the hat stuff that's been happening with Hager recently. So we got 2 of those matches for Dynamite. We got the Starks and Page match for Dynamite. And, you know, we're going to follow that up with a few other things as well. After this match was the Saraya against Dr. Britt Baker D.M.D. match. And this was my least favorite match of the main card. And everybody's going to crap on it. I know. But I got to be honest. And, you know, the honesty comes in this way. Saraya wrestling this match, in general, it was hard for me to get into it because the entire time, and I think that the crowd was pretty silent too, and they were probably feeling the same thing that I was feeling. It's hard for me to get into it because the entire time I'm worried about her. And I'm just thinking, I don't want to see some kind of a drop kick that ends up taking her out, or she takes a bump and then she can't get back up or anything. Because I am not a doctor. I can't imagine that they would have cleared her. It doesn't make any sense to me, and it just seems like it's horribly unsafe. So I'm just sitting there concerned and not able to actually enjoy the match. But even when I'm watching the match, yeah, there's going to be ring rust. And for not wrestling for 5 years and having the injury and everything, she did a pretty damn good job. So of course I'm going to give her flowers when it comes to that. But this is where I get into trouble all the time, because I end up being in that gray area thing, which I end up pissing off both sides. You're going to get some people that are going to go, this match was shit. And they're not going to take into account she was injured and it's been 5 years and everything. So you got to be a little bit more on the lenient side. But then you're going to get plenty of people that are going to be way too lenient. And they're going to be talking about how this is the best match that they've ever seen. This is match of the year. And this is amazing. It's the best women's match that's ever been in AEW history and all this. And then I look at those people and I go, are you serious, or are you just happy that Paige is back? Because I'm glad that she came out of this feeling good. I'm glad that she was able to wrestle again, even if this is her only match that she ever has, that she went out with a win, feeling like she could be herself again. She's not at that Ric Flair stage yet where it's like, oh my God, okay, you've had your retirement 30 years ago and all that. And, how many retirement matches did Terry Funk have and such? It's a different story. And I look at it the same way the same with Edge. If Edge would have came back and only had that Randy Orton match at WrestleMania, that would have sucked that it would have been just that. But if that would have happened, I would have been like, oh, you know what? Good on him. Might not be the best match of the year. Might not be the best match of his career, any of those things. But at least good on him. He could end on that way. And that note is a much better end. If this is the end for Saraya, hey, look, she wrestled one of the best women that's out there right now, and she got a win. She did it on a pay-per-view. She could feel really good about herself that way. But if this is the level that we're going to get going forward, I can't say that I'm going to really enjoy all that because I do think that the match wasn't really all that great. It was fine, but it wasn't great. And you don't need to be on two of the extremes the way that a lot of people think that you have to do these days, where you have to love or hate something. You don't have to. You can say that some things are good and some things are bad and some things are okay. It's fine. So she did good for all the ring rust and for the injury. Very glad that she was able to walk out of this and not be injured and, banged up in any other kind of way. That would have been absolutely horrible. But I'm not going to say that it was some amazing match because it just wasn't anything particularly amazing. And I think that that's going to be one of those things that people will still bitch and complain, and they're going to be like, oh, you must hate all women's wrestling, which is just absolutely ridiculous, especially because I'm going to praise something else that happened a little bit later on and all. And I just praised the Jade Cargill match and said that was much better than I was expecting. So, listen to the criticism as you want and bitch and complain if you want, whatever. You're going to live in your own little bubble if that's the case. But Saraya wins, and going forward, we'll see where this ends up going. I don't know. Maybe it leads to some kind of a title match, and maybe it leads to a title win. And at least if it does, let's hope that it doesn't go in the same direction that the CM Punk comeback ended up going. Because, if we fast forward a year from now and people are chanting "fuck Saraya" like "fuck CM Punk" ended up going, then we got a bit of a track record going on here. But it was what it was. And let's move on to the TNT Championship 3-way match. Wardlow defending against Samoa Joe and Powerhouse Hobbs. I only had 2 notes for this. And that's not because it was bad or anything. It was just because I was, kind of doing a couple things here and there, and I didn't really talk about any specific moves except for Wardlow jumping off the top rope and, acting like he's on Lucha Libre. But, he is doing some stuff like that all the time that really surprises me. I think Wardlow's great. He starts that powerbomb symphony, and Joe cuts him off, hits him with the title belt, and capitalizes on a knocked out Hobbs, locks him into submission. Samoa Joe wins the TNT Championship. And somebody, I forget who it was, I can't give you credit for it on Twitter, but if you search for it, I'm sure you can find it. Somebody had tweeted out, oh, Samoa Joes are double champs, and it was a picture of Joe with the 2 belts, his ROH TV title and the TNT title, and then Roman Reigns with the 2 world titles. So it's all, look at these Samoan Joes are double champs. I think that was funny. I like it. Wardlow doesn't have to lose the match, but he loses the title. Gives him a little bit more flexibility that he doesn't necessarily have to defend that title going forward and be booked in those sort of scenarios. Joe is great. I've been a big fan of Joe from even when he was in TNA. He was one of the few guys that I was like, man, I hope that WWE just snatches him up. It was like Joe, Styles, Rude, Storm. There's a group of like 10 that I was just like, I want them to not be an Impact because I want to watch them more. I'd have to go back and double check some of the other ones. But yeah, Joe has always been somebody that I've been a big fan of. So you put a title on him. I like it. And even though Hobbs losing is something that's unfortunate, because I would have been fine with Hobbs winning the title too, I do think in the grand scheme that Wardlow not taking the pin or not submitting is the bigger deal. So maybe we get the TV title on the line and Wardlow ends up winning that and they trade belts or something. Maybe we get the TNT title back on Wardlow. Maybe Wardlow just moves on. I don't know. But I'm interested. And I'd be totally down to see another singles match between them. Reggie says he thinks that Saraya is going to beat Jamie Hayter. That's something to talk about as well. Dane says, remember when Wardlow was over after the MJF feud? Over. Yeah. I think we're going to come back around to that at some point. I'll say that. So we had those interview things going on, setting up those the things with Hager and Jericho and all that. And then we got a match that I think overall was kind of on the flat side. The no DQ tag team match between Darby Allin and Sting against Jay Lethal and Jeff Jarrett. It turned into a no DQ match, pretty much on a whim. They announced that on the 0 hour. I don't know if they had announced anything ahead of time. They might have, but at least I didn't catch wind of it until it was the 0 hour. And then it ended up being, some moments here and there that were interesting, like Saddam Singh catching Darby Allin like he weighs nothing and just tossing him around. I thought that was kind of fun. There's a coffin drop that is just a spot for Jeff Jarrett to hit Darby Allin in the back with the guitar. I thought that was kind of funny. And, they did their thing. It was a match, as Drew would say. It was a match. I don't think it needed to be on this pay-per-view, especially considering that we ended everything at midnight. If you would have cut this, I think that would have been perfectly fine. It didn't need to be there. It could have very easily been the main event of Dynamite. It could have been something that they waited to pull the trigger on until winter was coming and made that something kind of special and just not start this feud when they did. And, it doesn't really do anything for the idea to me that the more interesting idea is Darby Allin splitting with Sting. This was just, why don't we do a tag team match instead? And we just kind of put that on hold. So, as much as I do tend to like Jeff Jarrett more than some other people, and I think that, Jay Lethal is the thumbs up, and Sting, of course, is great. Darby Allin's fun. This didn't really do too much for me. It was fine. And it ended with not the best finish. Scorpion Death Drop wasn't the cleanest looking one, but a Scorpion Death Drop that leads into a coffin drop, and Darby Allin gets the win for his team, and there you go. It's just kind of a thing that happened. It's not the biggest talking point that comes out of this. Frankie says Jeff Jarrett got no reaction from the crowd. I didn't pay too much attention to his entrance to see if that was the case, but yeah, I think that the crowd was a little bit burned out at this point too. So they popped for some things, but there were a couple times where they were just feeling low. And leading into the next match, which was the Interim Women's World Championship match, it took a while for this crowd to heat back up. Hayter's getting a pop when she comes out. Fans are very pro Hayter. They're not haters. They like Hayter. That's what I mean. And, they like Toni Storm and everything too as well. But it was a good, I don't know, however many minutes. Felt like it was like a good 10 minutes or so before this actually started to get much of a reaction from the crowd. So I think that they were just kind of feeling low on energy. And then it took until Rebel came out and hit Toni Storm with the belt. Then people started to pay attention because they thought that was going to be the end of the match. Referee gets Rebel ejected from ringside. Britt Baker pops back up. Storm just keeps kicking out. More interference. At the end of the day, despite all the near falls, which really gets the crowd all riled up, Hayter is able to push Toni Storm into an exposed turnbuckle, hit her finisher. You got a new interim champion. So Storm loses, but she looks strong in the process. Same as what happened with Wardlow. And you got a new interim women's champion, which counts, but it doesn't count because it is interim. So at any point, Thunder Rosa could just come back and all this is completely eradicated. But I still think that they're going to go in the direction of Hayter versus Storm versus Rosa. And I think that Storm is going to win the title back. Whenever that happens, I'm kind of banking on that. Hayter not getting a proper championship reign will probably not sit well with people if that does happen. But then again, Storm is in the same boat. It really probably should have just been you take the title off of Rosa and make the Storm one official, and then the Hayter one's official, and you just move on. But they were very happy, the crowd, to see Jamie Hayter win. And I think it was the right call. And it was another thing I got right on my perfect pick, so my points are going to be good for that. Are we 100% sure Thunder Rosa is returning? It seems like that's the case. I mean, there hasn't been any indication that I've heard that would say otherwise. I know that she's had some issues and some backstage stuff and all, but it seemed like the most recent one that I had come across was her talking about that she wasn't too far off from returning. Maybe not. I don't know. I mean, look at CM Punk. You never know what will happen. But I think that Hayter is the right call here. Not only is it the most interesting thing that they could do, just to kind of spice things up, but fans are pro Hayter. So give them something that they can enjoy and see what happens after that. The match itself took a while for me to get into it as well, as I mentioned. And, when it started to heat up, then I was definitely locked in. But for the first few minutes of it, I was feeling kind of like I didn't really need to pay that much attention. It wasn't keeping my eyesight. And then once you start getting out of the near falls, then I warmed up to it. So thumbs up in the grand scheme. World Championship for the tag team titles is on the line after that. Max Caster has another great rap, as per usual. And Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland, as per usual, again, can't get on the same page, and they have a good match. You know, a lot of back and forth, all that stuff. Gets to the point that Swerve gets some pliers out, and he's going to injure Max Caster's fingers, because you can't do that scissor thing if you don't have your fingers working all that well. You're in a cast. But Billy Gunn comes out, stops him, and with the pliers, that leads to another situation, copying and pasting a little bit from what happened earlier with the Hammer and Rey Fenix and Pac. This time, Swerve is trying to convince Keith Lee to use the pliers. Keith Lee throws him away, picks up Anthony Bowens, gives him a little pat on the back, and then walks away and leaves Swerve. So the way that they put this over on commentary is, you know, he's got dignity. He'd rather lose and not become a champion than to win the titles in the wrong way. And Swerve is now having a 2-on-1 match, so of course he ends up losing. The Acclaimed retain those titles like they should, and I am happy that they split up Swerve and Our Glory. I think that this tag team from the very start has been doing this whole when are we going to break up thing, and it went on long enough. They won those tag titles and everything. They did what they needed to do, so split them up, have the feud, move on after that. I still kind of wish Keith Lee could go back to WWE, to be honest. I think Swerve works better in AEW, but I think that Keith Lee is kind of getting lost in the shuffle. So maybe Keith Lee ends up being the guy that dethrones Samoa Joe for that TNT title. Or maybe he ends up feuding with the world champion down the line. I don't know. We'll see. Let's see what we got after that was the main event itself. And the world championship, of course, if you didn't know going into this, was MJF going in to challenge Jon Moxley. And it started at 11:30, so I was just like, oh, you know how Tony Khan said that was going to end at a reasonable time? But, you know, I'm curious if anybody asked him that on the immediate scrum. This entire match was pro MJF crowd, babyface MJF, fuck you, Jon Moxley type of atmosphere. And MJF was really hamming it up, and it was great. He was wrestling a clean match outside of a couple of moments here and there. Like he spit something in Moxley's face and such. But Moxley was playing more of the heel role for the majority of it. You got some good stuff like a pile driver through the table from the ring apron. Always love the pile drivers, especially, you know, when you get to do it through a table. The hulking up stuff with MJF, you know, the crowd's getting behind him and all this. And we get to a spot where even after all these different moments of reversing a figure four and kicking out of an avalanche paradigm shift off the top rope and all this, MJF pulls the referee into Moxley's path. So referee's down. Referee Bryce Remsburg, if I remember correctly. And he starts to pull out his Dynamite Diamond ring. William Regal comes back out, tells him, put it down. Don't you even think about it. I'll smash your face with it if you do that, anything with that. So MJF throws it down and gets caught in a sleeper hold. And then the new referee, Paul Turner, gets a little bit of a backlash from Moxley, so he gets taken out. And in the process of both referees being down, Regal slips brass knucks to MJF. So Remsburg doesn't see it. MJF nails Moxley with the brass knucks. 1, 2, 3, you got your new champion. William Regal has turned on the BCC and Moxley and has aligned himself with William Regal, with MJF. And you got a new champion. MJF is on top of the world. 26-year-old is the AEW world champion. Big fan of this. A lot of people, Frankie in the chat as well, you know, this was an option that we all saw as a potential thing, was William Regal turning on MJF or turning on Moxley and signing with MJF. So it's not like it's the biggest swerve that's ever happened, but I think that it's one that can work really, really well and makes some sense too. You know, William Regal is better as a heel, and he's in that range where you're going to want to cheer him no matter what because of his whole career and everything. But I think that the brass knucks story really kind of led into this. And, you know, Moxley's had his time as champion. He had his big long run the first one. Then he ended up being the interim champion. Then he went back from CM Punk and the vacated title and all that. So it's not like if they would have kept it on Moxley that there would have been anybody necessarily that I would have been super interested in seeing go forward. Like Moxley versus Ethan Page, sure. Yeah, it's something. but it wouldn't have had the same heat by any means as putting this title on MJF. And MJF is my favorite guy that's in AEW. So, hey, what am I going to hate about when my favorite people end up getting more stuff that they're going with, you know? You put a title on Orange Cassidy. I like it. You put a title on MJF. I like it. You put a belt on somebody I don't like, I'm going to be like, I don't want to watch that guy before. So I like the idea of the turn. I like that MJF is still a heel. I like that he is the champion. I liked all of it. Big thumbs up on that one. Dane says, we want Miro. Miro's not had a good year in AEW. He might end up being my pick for biggest downgrade, actually, because you compare the way that he was doing for a little while there with the TNT title compared to what he's been doing this year. Oof, not good. So yeah, that's Full Gear. That was overall very, very solid pay-per-view in my mind. A couple little hiccups here and there, but nothing really to complain about. And even though it is ending, the post show at least is ending at around 1:45 in the morning. And we could have ended up a little bit earlier just because he cut a couple things from that card. I do think that in the grand scheme, if you would have cut 3 matches from this and kind of moved around a little bit, or maybe started a little bit earlier too, that maybe that would have been a little bit better. But they're still trying to play around with this, like pack everything in there and get it all in there thing. But I like this pay-per-view, and I'm excited to see what they go with some of these things going forward. Samoa Joe as TNT champion is something that I'm interested in. I am interested to see, of course, what happens with MJF going forward and everything. I want to see who the Acclaimed ends up going up against next. You know, who's going to end up being the next number 1 contenders for the tag titles. Good stuff going on here. And I think that we've got pretty much everything covered. I don't think I'm missing anything there. Let's see what Dan says in the chat. He's not even on TV, but we got to watch The Best Friends. Give me a break. Frankie seconds that on Miro. Would you guys think at this point Miro should just go back to WWE, or do you think that he needs to stick around? I mean, he might not be able to based off the contracts and stuff, but he is somebody that I kind of feel maybe under the Triple H era, he might be doing a little bit better if he is able to swing back over to the other side. Maybe Malachi Black too. Yeah, there's a couple people. So, drop your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us anything that you want to talk about. If you want to show your support for us, make sure you keep in mind all this marketplace stuff that you can see on your screen right now if you're watching on YouTube. Redbubble and TeePublic for the merchandise stuff. If you want to toss a little spare change our way through the thanks button or the super chats and everything that we got going on here, that's another cool way of doing that. Also, click that join button on YouTube, and you get access to the same things that are over there on the Patreon, like the Pick Your Poison tier or the Darkcast tier, or even just the $1 a month lending a hand tier, just to be like, yeah, you know what? Cool job, guys. Here's $1. Well, less than $1 because they take out taxes. So here's like 60 cents or something. But even if you just hit that like button, that'll go a long way too in helping us out. And just the fact that you were listening to this is also awesome. It means that you're awesome. Miro would be better in WWE, says Ted. And the next thing that you guys are going to be hearing from us is going to be the combo of the hot tags and the Survivor Series pay-per-view point predictions. I'm going to combine those all because of the holiday. And then we've got the Saturday Survivor Series. So I'm going to be heading back to New York and then having to do the pay-per-view cover. So I might be in a little bit of a salty mood. I don't know. It's going to kind of depend. But I hope that Survivor Series is great. And we'll talk more about our predictions and everything that goes along that spectrum in a few days. Probably record that either on Tuesday or Wednesday. Kind of depends on our schedules. I'm kind of thinking right now that Tuesday might be a little bit better just because it's less around the holiday. And, I got to see what the guys are up to with that. But, Tuesday, Wednesday, you'll hear us at some point. And we'll run that pay-per-view down just like we did this one. And as we go through the rest of the year, I mean, there's not much left. Right after that, we're going to start getting into some of those awards things. We're going to have to start recording them sometime like mid-December or so. And I think we got 1 week in the meantime between that where we're going to try to cram something else in there. Maybe I had a couple ideas, and maybe since we're doing this live chat, maybe I'll get some feedback immediately that's going on right now. But what do you guys think between these? One idea that I had going on between Survivor Series and the ROH Final Battle and NXT Deadline stuff is the potential mock draft of people that have been in Survivor Series matches. So the only people that we're working with are people that have been in a team, like a elimination team match. So we're talking like, Eric Rowan and Dolph Ziggler and Ryback and all those, dating back to the people that were in like the King's Court. So you can, somebody's going to end up drafting Doink the Clown's crew, but maybe not all of them. That's another thing. So I'm thinking that maybe that would be kind of fun. And then we can kind of follow that up with some other stuff. But if we have any other ideas, then maybe we'll get into some of those other things. We haven't done a few of these other things throughout the year. We haven't done a whole lot of like Superstar Scores, for instance. So maybe people are interested in that. We haven't done Wrestling is 2020 in a while. We haven't done a fan tracks in a while, or fan outs table. So maybe we'll try to figure something out with that. I don't know. Toss your comments. What suggestions do you have? We actually have 2 blank weeks now that I'm looking at the calendar. So the November 30th episode and the December 14th one, unless we end up just recording the awards because of the fact that the holidays are going to be thrown off. That might actually end up being the case. We might end up having to skip a week or something. I don't know. That's tough, but we'll figure it out down the line and we'll let you know. This is the time of year where things just get crazy, and me not being around right in front of my computer all the time is going to be making that a little bit more difficult too. So we'll try to sort it out. We'll let you know. But if you have any suggestions, drop them in the comments below while you're telling me what you thought about Full Gear. And we will see you when we see you, everybody, next time around with those Survivor Series and hot tags things. Adios for now, though. This has been another Smark Out moment, and I am being counted out.